Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is George Burke. We have an interesting show tonight. We have the independent candidates for the 3 Northern Virginia congressional districts, the 10th, the 11th, and the 8th. And I want to say a couple of things on the front end right away. Any of my regular viewers understand that I am the chair of the 11th Congressional District Democratic Committee. I've already made my choice, but that's beside the point in terms of this race. I think it's important that we hear these independent voices in this race. I also want to point out a couple of other things. We participated in the League of Women Voters debate for the 8th District. The 8th District independent Green candidate participated in that debate. But the independent candidates from the 11th and the 10th did not get the same opportunities because in both races, the Republicans refused to participate in the League of Women Voters debates. Keith Fimian in the 11th refused to participate with Connolly and Joe Odo, and Frank Wolf in the 10th refused to participate with Judy Fader and Niraj Nigam, who's the independent candidate. I believe Judy will be on this show next week, so you will have an opportunity to see her. So we have tried to be fair to all the candidates. We wanted to have debates between all the candidates, but as I said, in the 10th and in the 11th, the Republicans refused to participate. Anyway, with no further ado, I would like to introduce our guests tonight. From my immediate left, we have Niraj Nigam, who is the candidate for the 10th Congressional District. He's an independent candidate in that race. Also in that race are Judy Fader as the Democrat and Frank Wolf, who is the incumbent Republican. Further in the middle here is Joe Odo, who's the independent Green candidate in the 11th Congressional District. The other candidates in that race are Democrat Jerry Connolly and Republican Keith Fimian. Finally, on the far end of the table is Ron Fisher, the independent Green candidate in the 8th Congressional District. The other people in that race are incumbent Jim Moran, the Democrat congressman, and Mark Elmore, who is the Republican. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm glad to have you today.
Thank you.
And right off the bat, because I think there's probably still a lot of our viewers who really don't know who you guys are. So I'm going to start with Niraj. I ask you in about 30 seconds or so to give us a rundown of who you are. We'll talk about why you're running later on, but a little bit of a biography on who you are and what prompted you to run.
Yes, I'm an independent candidate from the 10th District. I'm a senior scientist. I work for the IT field for a company called CACI, and I lead their software development team. I'm running for this office because I'm just upset with the way this country is going. I think it's going in the wrong direction, and we need to do something about it. And I did not see anybody else stepping up, so I said, okay, it's up to me. I'm going to do it. I'm not afraid of a challenge. I just want to do what's right and what's good for this country.
One quick question. You ran last time as well, Niraj?
Yes, I did. I ran last time as well. Thank you.
Okay. Joe Odo?
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm a freelance writer now by trade and also a sales management consultant. But a lot of my work of the writing business tends to lean towards politics because there's a lot of hot air to be written about in this town. And so that keeps me busy. I've been an activist, advocate for many causes for many years, including civil liberties, the getting rid of the income tax, and of course mass transportation. I'm a big advocate for rail around the Beltway instead of the toll road that they're building. So those are the issues that I tend to advocate for. And that's who I am.
Now, I remember you ran in the 11th in 04. You ran in 06?
Yes, I lived in Charlottesville for a couple of years then.
So you ran in the 6th, is that, or the 5th?
5th District
the 5th,
in Charlottesville.
Yep.
And,
that's Virgil Good's district.
Right,
yeah.
But it was the best part was running against Tom Davis in 2004, chairman of the Government Reform Committee. And I got a chance to debate him a few times to try to find out what he was reforming, and it turned out baseball, steroids, big national security stuff.
I was there. And Ron Fisher from the 8th, also in terms of full disclosure, Ron's kids and my kids, we've known each other a long time. They used to crew together in high school. And so, Ron, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an honors graduate of the Naval Academy. I'm a retired Navy captain. I served in nuke submarines and had a lot of great jobs in the Navy, worked in shipyards and overhauled submarines. And I have a couple of businesses I started, a Fire Protection Association for military fire safety and a veterans that deploys disabled veterans. And I'm running because it really is a disappointment. This war is one thing I'm running about, and also the massive spending we're doing in the government. We do need to get that redirected.
And in your 30 years in the Navy, if I recall correctly, your path has crossed more than once with John McCain.
Right. We were in the same class at the Naval Academy. I met him at the end of the summer of 50. I met him in the summer of '54, and he introduced me to his mother and sister in '54. It seemed like yesterday. And so, and we were in the same company, and after we graduated, we went to Europe together. And we had a real gay guy, and we had a good time.
Was he the Hellraiser and party boy they say he was in those days?
He seemed to be that. And but he was really fair-minded, and he really believed taking care of the underdog back then, and was really a good guy.
Let's get to some issues. Well, even before that, I sense in some of my discussions with at least a couple of you in the past, one of the purposes of your candidacy is to promote a third party within the process. I mean, obviously I'm a Democratic Party official, but the reality of the matter is, from my impression, the more the merrier. In a parliamentary form of government, we may have 4, 5, 6, in some countries, 7 or 8 different parties, and they have to form coalitions and compromise in order to get anything done. Here we have, in essence, 2. The other party, I mean, you have a Libertarian Party, you have the Independent Green Party, you have a variety of different parties. None of them have really gotten a foothold in Congress yet at this point. That doesn't mean it will not happen in the future, and you folks, I guess, are sort of pioneers in that area here in Virginia. Why the third party? What makes the third party so important? And everybody just, feel free to jump in.
It really is more of a fusion effort of, there's a lot more third parties than people realize. When the term third party itself is really a term for a multitude of anyone outside of the big 2. So there's a wide range of people on both the left and the right who carve out their ideological niche and run outside of the big 2. So you have Nader on one end, a Constitution Party guy on the other end, and I helped both of them on the ballot this year because for me, we tried to get a fusion candidate, someone who could power up the third party effort. We were going after someone like a Bloomberg who was running, who had declared his independence from the big 2 parties, who could finance his own campaign and not be beholden to the big dollar contributions that tends to drive politics today. So that's what we pushed for, George. But it's really, why do we do it? Because we don't see that much distinction between the big 2. When the big 2 both combined to pass the biggest welfare for Wall Street ever in our history, and they only did it in a couple weeks, that tells me that either A, the cards were preset on the table and they had it all planned, one last extraction from our national treasury. That's pathetic. And if both parties voted for this, they really don't show us much of a difference between the 2.
Well, I agree with Odo over there, because both the parties, they claim they're different, they want different issues, different things, but when it really counts, where their important issues are, they both work together, and they both work for themselves and their own interests. They don't represent the people. We need somebody else, and I think only a third party can do that.
We're the second party. That's one party. They use 2 names. We're the second party.
Right.
Well, I would have to beg to differ a little bit. I think you have some clear distinctions on philosophical issues between these parties.
Well, they have to make it look that way.
And, right. No, I think there truly is. And if you get down to the core values that each of the major parties represents, there's a broad difference between them. However, let's stick to this bailout for a minute. If you recall, the first time the bailout came to the House of Representatives, it failed because many of the House Republicans refused to support their own president, the guy who not only put the issue forward, But the guy who was, along with the Republicans in Congress, was the one who created the problem. And they refused to go along with it.
And they passed it when? After the earmarks were added, so that both parties could get their little grab on?
They got some more. They got some more Republicans in when they got their little piece. But let me pose the question in a broader sense: what would you have done instead at a time? Forget the CEOs and their golden parachutes. Forget propping up these huge investment houses. I mean, that's a bailout for the ultra wealthy. But what about the people on so-called, I mean, they use the word mainstream. What about the people in Fairfax County, the small businessmen who had no access to credit?
Well, I would like to talk about that. I've really looked at this, and the bailout was just absolutely absurd, the way they were going about it. And my answer is, and I think we need to do it today, is to repeal that before all that money gets spent. Jobs. What causes depressions? When people don't have jobs, they can't buy stuff. They don't buy it. More people get laid off, and then it's just a vicious cycle. The way to turn that around is to take that money. We cannot afford that war in Iraq. We're deep in the hole on the money, and the deficit's going to be $1 trillion this year. Clearly, at least $1 trillion. And so we need to get people with jobs. When they do that, they'll pay their mortgages, they'll pay their payroll taxes, they'll pay for goods, the main thing, and then they'll end up being able to hire more people, and we'll turn it around. We can turn it around very rapidly. It will not get turned around. Before, during the Depression, we had gardens, we're more dispersed, but today we're in big trouble unless we do this now.
So would you have suggested immediately creating 8 million make-work jobs?
It would not be make-work. We have some meaningful work that needs to be done. We could install passive electrical. I did send out an email today outlining, and I spoke about it this morning, about 8 areas where we need work. Healthcare. We need work in workers in education, pre-K. And we need to get the people employed across the board, everywhere. We're going to have some massive forest fires. We are having them, billion-dollar fires, and we need, for example, there too, not only save that money, but we ought to cut this massive defense spending. I was in the Navy 30 years. I love submarines, but we do not need nuclear submarines.
There's no doubt, but we were in a situation, and we're probably going to have to do a lot of this after the break. We're coming up to break in a minute. Time flies on television. But we were in a situation where we were facing an immediate meltdown because the administration was asleep at the switch until it was too late. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree with Paulson or Bernanke in terms of their assessment. I think they're just striking in the dark. But we needed to do something immediately to restore some confidence, to at least try to get some kind of credit flowing back to small businesses, among others. And we're going to discuss this some more. I hope we get past the bailout in this hour. I think we've got a lot of views we want to listen to here. Our number here is 571-749-1166. And I encourage you to give us a call to talk to these independent candidates. And we shall be back with some more discussion in 2 minutes. So I hope you'll stay with us on Inside Scoop, Virginia.
This year, 28,000 Americans died from cancer. Every year, 50,000 die.
I needed to find smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer. No family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. a community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty, but one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. We have the independent candidates for Congress in the 10th, 11th, and 8th congressional districts tonight. We've had the Democrats on. I don't think we've had Judy Fader on yet, but she's going to be on next week from the 10th. And again, they are Niraj Nigam from the 10th, Joe Odo from the 11th, and Ron Fisher from the 8th. Let's go back to the economy, Ron. I sort of interrupted you when we had to go to the break.
Well, and the idea of what they did, they were trying to get the government Paulson was trying to get the government to buy mortgage-backed securities. And these most of the mortgages in there some of them were fraudulent. They were, and it would be senseless to sell them to the government. And what they were saying, they would auction them off. Changing hands of them would have been very expensive and take a lot of time. The idea is, if they're going to auction them off, the owners of. I said today you should break them down into individual mortgages and handle each one of them locally. The government could guarantee a couple of months of payments so that they could figure out what the problem is.
And that would be a good idea, but just imagine the government that buys $1,000 hammers buying these mortgages. I can imagine a $500,000 home being bought for $1 million.
Exactly. Why aren't we giving the money directly to the homeowners, the people who are in trouble? Why won't we write down the interest rate for these people, keep them in their homes? You know what, George? If you say we didn't see this coming, it happened suddenly, but you know what?
The administration didn't see it happen.
There were a lot of signs.
They did not care.
Yeah, but you know,
the Democrats came to a head.
But the Democrats in Congress should have seen it coming too, and if they let the conditions fester as has gotten out of hand, I mean, why all of a sudden they come up with $800 billion? Why couldn't we have put that kind of money in infrastructure for green jobs and expanded the solar and wind and the geothermal production and had people working? Because with a good working infrastructure in America, building high-speed rail all across the country, we could have put people to work at doing that, getting off the dependency on foreign oil. You know what? We wouldn't have had this problem. Everybody would be working, they'd be paying their taxes, paying their mortgages. None of this meltdown would have happened.
Remember, though, that this money was pushed in an emergency, the same way the Bush administration pushed the Iraq War on us.
Absolutely.
Again, they pushed it on us like that. But the reality of the matter is it came very quickly. Up until a month ago, people were working. Unemployment was not high, certainly not in Northern Virginia, but around most of the country. There were pockets, but there was no high unemployment. Small businesses and businesses had access to credit. All of a sudden, Wall Street tanks, and it all disappears.
According to who?
It tanked because President Bush and the government, to get support for the bill, raised this fear in the minds of the people.
Well, it was tanking before.
It was tanking
According
because
to who?
investors did not have money.
You had the fourth largest bank in the country go belly up before the bailout.
But
you had one of the biggest investment brokers, investment banks in the country that's been around for 160 years go belly up. All of a sudden, this happened very quickly.
Right.
Not that there weren't many matters that precipitated it. But something had to be done quickly. Was it the right thing to do? Only history will tell. But it's great to create green jobs. It's great to do these things, but it could not have happened overnight. And they needed to do something to establish some confidence. Have they gotten the confidence they expected? I don't think so.
No, they haven't. Oh, no, by no means.
And has credit started flowing to small, there are auto dealers around the country right now. The Post had a story about Vallejo, California going belly up today. and in today's paper, and they talked about the major auto dealer going belly up. Well, that's happening here too. I've talked to a lot of small businessmen, whether it's in Annandale or other parts of Fairfax, for example, who can't make their payrolls.
Right.
They can't borrow the money.
About the credit, really important. There is no shortage of money. The investors have a pool of about $69 trillion.
The banks are afraid to lend it.
They're afraid to lend it for two reasons. One, they won't lend it to another bank because they don't trust them. Because they've been selling each other these credit defaults, the swaps, and they've been selling each other these securities that are no good. So now it won't do any good to do the things they're doing. It will do no good to invest money in the bank. They have plenty. Bank of America has, and the Citigroup have insurance companies, they have all kinds of money.
Everybody has money but the people. If the people spend the money, then the economy has to go up. And we should have given the money to the people. The bailout was almost $3,000 per man, woman, and child. If that had gone in the hands of the people would have spent that money, they would have bought their cars or whatever. The business would not have gone under because they would have had
I disagree giving them money.
You can't buy a car for $3,000.
No, you got to give them jobs.
In this area of the country, $3,000 is one mortgage payment, maybe one and a quarter mortgage payment. So it doesn't mean much.
That's per man, woman, and child. But you can have a family of 2.5 kids, then you've got $10,000, $12,000 per family.
The economic stimulus, just giving people checks, is not going to do it. They have to get jobs. There's plenty of work to go around, meaningful jobs, and as soon as that gets rolling, it'll leverage itself.
Actually, when the people spend the money, they're going to buy it from businesses. Okay. Businesses are going to have to hire people to fulfill that demand.
Right, there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger thing at work here. There's an economic trend that's destabilizing, and that is a federal deficit that's out of control.
Right, that is correct.
And
yes.
along with trade deficit being out of control, the country not being competitive anymore. That's why I advocate for replacing the income tax, replacing it with a national consumption tax, make the America attractive for investment again.
Remember, 8 years ago, there was no federal deficit. There was a surplus that was being used to buy down the debt, the national debt, at the end of the Clinton administration. And in 8 short years, the Bush administration, and for 6 of those years, the Republican Congress, let's face it, the Democrats have only been in power 2 years in the Congress, and they don't have the kind of margins. They can't get anything through the Senate because they don't have the 60 votes to beat the filibuster. So in essence, you've got one house where you have some modicum of control. The other house, you have no control. And in 8 years, the Bush administration created the largest deficit in our nation's history, by far.
It is breathtaking the amount of money that they've extracted out of our Treasury, George, and how they managed to double the deficit in that amount of time. But you know what? I still see the one-party system at work here, because there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that they are not attending to. You just look at where one of every 4 tax dollars goes, and that's the Department of Defense. And in that report that comes out every year, they talk about waste, fraud, abuse, improper payments that they haven't got their handle on. So where's the outcry? Where's the Reform Committee when it changed hands from Mr. Davis to the Democrats? Where were they? They haven't come out and fixed that. They won't even come out and answer the people who voted them in office and talk about impeachment anymore, right, Ron?
The other one is the fact that even the Democrats in there didn't have to put this up for a vote. They did not have to put the supplementals on for Iraq. They didn't have to put this vote. They could have just sat on it, and they wouldn't have to do that. And I really fought them. And they're all blaming the president for many of these things. And I agree with you. He's the worst president ever. However, they've decided the taxes. They decide the appropriations. So we've got to get. That's
true. But again, as someone who spent a lot of time there, politics, first of all, is the art of compromise. Second of all, yes, the majority rules. But you may have what appears to be a majority in the Senate with 51, 50 plus Lieberman in terms of Democrats. But the reality of the matter is nothing can get through the Senate the way the Republicans are playing the game without 60 votes.
Let me give you an example, George. How much is the federal deficit last year?
Who knows? It's too much.
Would you say it was 450 or a trillion?
450.
Pick a number.
Well, it depends if you include the Iraq money in it. It depends.
195 billion a trillion that they leave off the books, plus $225 billion that Social Security should have a surplus. That goes into the regular general treasury, and then they still come up with more budget, so deficit. So it's really $1 trillion deficit. And because your party too has voted for these appropriations, Congressman Moran here is on that committee, he wrote those bills, and he'll even vote against them after he writes them in, right?
Well, we talk about infrastructure. If you want to talk about Congressman Moran, what about the Wilson Bridge? What about the Springfield interchange?
That should be handled by the Transportation Committee. If he gives an earmark to some...
Well, but the Transportation Committee only authorizes it. Ultimately, the Appropriations Committee is when it comes up with the money.
But what they do is put earmarks. He earmarks all this money, and it isn't part of the
Yeah, they should be
budget process.
accountable for it.
And if it wasn't, we'd still be dealing with a bridge that had the floor of the bridge falling into the river.
If you had that money that we've spent on all these earmarks and all the on this, well, particularly the war, there was no markup on the last legislation. Now I'd like to turn this around and say the solution. How do we avert this depression? And the answer, I believe, is to get Congress back in session right now,
before the
election, and repeal that $700 billion, end this Iraq war, just cut off the funding for it.
Let me take a wild guess. It ain't going to happen in an election year. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, we got a lot of put pressure on them. Let Obama and McCain come in there and say, here's what programs we're going to work on.
Yeah, they could take a leadership position and do something bold like that, George. But
you guys, I think you're oversimplifying the process. Congress, particularly the Senate, is designed by the Founding Fathers to move at a glacial pace. If it did not move at a glacial pace, we'd be in real trouble.
We are in real trouble.
But the fact of the matter is it's specifically designed to move slowly on purpose, so things do not get rushed through.
Well, how is it that the Senate came up with the bill when the House voted down the bailout? How is it that the Senate came up with that bill, considering that it was supposed to, all appropriations bills are supposed to originate in the House anyway?
Right. Yeah, well,
that was an unconstitutional move.
The administration
Talk about rushing
real hard. The administration was pushing real hard, saying we were hitting a depression.
Right, so that glacial thing you're talking about, that's a nice, convenient excuse.
But generally it is, if you read the Constitution, that's how it's designed to move. We are going to have to take a break here. I am enjoying this discussion immensely. I don't necessarily agree with what these guys are saying, but I respect their right to say it. And we shall be back in 2 minutes with Niraj Nigam, Joe Odo, and Ron Fisher, who are the independent candidates for Congress in the 10th, the 11th, and the 8th. See you in 2.
Okay.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. We're having a lively and feisty conversation with the independent candidates for Congress from the 10th, 11th, and 8th. Niraj Nigam from the 10th, Joe Odo from the 11th, and Ron Fisher from the 8th. Well, we've beat the dead horse of the economy around quite a bit. We could spend the whole hour on it, but I want to get to some other issues. Let's go to probably one of the stickiest, and that is immigration. There's been a lot of pontificating, a lot of rhetoric. We've seen what's happened in Prince William, where they tried to take over the federal government's role relative to immigration, and their economy went to hell in a handbasket because of it. I don't think anyone will disagree that the federal government has failed miserably in what is a federal responsibility, and that is securing our borders and having an appropriate immigration policy to allow folks into this country. Let's face it, we are a country of immigrants. We're all immigrants. We all came from somewhere else. My grandparents came off the boat, and you know, at some point, you know, you guys came, your relatives came over here too. None of us were, you know, natives of this land. You know, and my personal opinion is that, particularly in places like Fairfax, it has added to the fabric of the quality of life that we enjoy here.
Yes, it has, but we all came here legally.
Correct.
And we obeyed the laws of this land, and we helped bring prosperity over here. People who are coming here illegally, they're breaking the laws of this land. They bring the wrong culture and wrong values because they think that by breaking the laws of this land, they can get what they want to get. There's a wrong attitude for people. And along with that, with open borders, we can have even tourists coming in through. And that's a big danger to our nation.
So how do we seal our borders? We put up a 100-foot wall? They always say you put up a 20-foot wall, they use a 21-foot ladder.
Well, we need to do something. And I think, yes, a wall itself will not solve the problem. The Berlin Wall did not solve the problem, and this wall will not solve the problem. But if we take a strong issue against illegal immigrants, if we were not to promote, support, or even reward them, I'm really sorry that both of our candidates are not taking a strong issue against illegal immigrants. They want to legalize them all. They don't want to reward the illegal behavior.
So should we build concentration camps and round them up and put sharpshooters at the border, or what?
We don't need to put concentration camps. We don't need to build sharpshooters there. But we need to get to them that they cannot come here illegally.
Do you think the people who are here are going to leave? They're not going to leave.
That's what I'm saying.
Well,
the problem becomes so bad we cannot get rid of them. If there was a magic wand that would get rid of them all, I would wave it. But we don't have it. We have to somehow legalize them for temporary as long as they are working. But they should not be given any permanent status. They should not be allowed to live here forever. They should not be able to retire here. As long as we give them some sort of temporary legal status, as long as they are working, as long as they're earning money, as long as they're paying their taxes, they can continue to live here.
So if they're out of work,
I'd like to address this, but they are people. They are people of the United States. The Constitution and the 14th Amendment guarantee them, everybody here, the same rights. There's no such thing as an illegal alien. Unless they're tried and convicted, you're presumed innocent under our laws. And it would be a horrible mistake. What we're doing now is violating many people's rights. The Immigration Service has no right to go around and round up people. Any warrants that issued has to name the person and the place to be searched. These are absolute rights. They did not come here because they came here to work. They're coming here to work. And one of the reasons, because we took the land that makes up Texas, New Mexico, California, that was literally stolen by the United States. Now, I think it's great it's part of the United States. But what we have to do is, we need to figure out a way to have them working. And there's no two classes of citizens, no two classes of people in the United States. We all have the same rights.
Yeah, we all have the same rights, but all the rights are based on our obeying the laws of this land.
Well, wait a second.
We need the people. Let them come in legally. We need to.
Well, what about people like my grandparents? You know, I think some of them came in illegally, but I'm not sure they all did. But it was very easy for somebody who's white and looked like everybody else in this country to cross the Canadian border.
Right.
Who would know the difference? So what's that mean to me? I'm two generations of a citizen, but there may have been some of my relatives who originally came in illegally. So am I some kind of weird status because of that?
You were born.
Well, what about the children who were born here, who are now teenagers or even young adults, the children of undocumented
That's right, Neeraj.
They
What
were
you're
born- they
saying
were
is,
born here.
if the
They are
people
US
lose their
citizens.
job, you can't say, all right,
No,
you got to
split
leave
up my
now,
family.
because they got kids here.
No, I'm not
Look,
saying.
You're going to say their father and mother home.
I'm not saying temporary for they lose their job or something. I mean, if they lose their job, I mean, people change jobs. I can quit my job and go someplace else. For a short term like that, we do not kick them out. I'm saying they let them live here as long as they're working, as long as they're ready to work. When they're ready to retire, then they need to go back.
Well, that's
This is a distraction
Hey,
issue
Sergeant-
is what it really is, George.
I agree.
We're not really getting to the real substantive issues that the country is under siege with right now. I mean, sending soldiers overseas for military adventurism, that's something we should be concerned with. The robbing of our treasury, the whole budget of the United States should be a statement of our values as a country. And if we don't even care about the wanton waste and abuse of our tax dollars, and we're sending our soldiers off to die for a war for profits, that's a very poor statement on our country. And immigration and other gay marriage, those issues are just distractions. Don't look over here while we pickpocket you over here.
I think that's a very astute observation, Joe. I just want to close out by what I thought was interesting is you folks have different views.
Exactly.
And
Sure.
it's, different views on
Absolutely.
immigration, which I found very interesting, number one. And number two, we're not going to solve immigration overnight. And I agree, it is a diversionary issue. The Republicans tried it 2 years ago to raise it.
Right.
They've been test marketing this for
Right.
some time. And quite frankly, it hasn't gotten a lot of legs.
Just like your party test marketed the health care back in the Hillary
Yeah, well,
era.
in fact, the problem with what Hillary did is she tried to bite off too much. The Republicans had an opportunity to frame it as nationalized health care, which was not what it ever was, but it wasn't fully developed, and it killed it dead. We're back there now, and that's still a serious problem. And we'll talk about the war in a minute, although it's surprising how the war is no longer one of the top issues in the minds of voters, I think, in any of your congressional districts.
Well,
At
and
least the
that's
polling data
disturbing.
I have seen.
The economy, oil has taken over.
But it's disturbing that there still really isn't a whole lot of citizen outcry over any of the real important
It's
issues. George,
disturbing.
I think that people, look, 50% of the elections across the country are unopposed, right? And that's why I look at running outside the big two parties, because where's the opposition? Why aren't they running someone in every contested race? And if the people are that passive that they won't get involved, that we have a major problem.
You're
with.
going to have a
Virginia,
diversionary
the
issue
Democrats are
again. This is the time to talk about the war. And you're right, but people are worried about their jobs. And one of the reasons we don't have those jobs, we're spending $10 billion or $12 billion a month over there. So the idea is to get this war over with. I think this is the time to do it.
Well, I think most Americans would agree with you. But the reality of the matter is, well, we have men and women dying over there, and forget the dying, it's all of the people coming back injured who would have been dead in Vietnam. And I personally know a few who've come back. Meanwhile, Americans are shopping at the mall. You don't even, thanks to the Bush administration, you barely know we have a war over there. If you don't watch the network news, you don't even see it on CNN anymore.
I'd like to just tell you just a little bit about this book. It's Vincent Bugliosi. I've heard him speak twice. I had dinner with him the other night. He clearly shows that Bush is guilty of murder of our servicemen that have died. They're guilty of the maiming of the ones who have been injured, the Iraqi people. He's guilty of murder of those people. And it's very simple. He shows where he lied about the national intelligence estimate.
Oh yeah, I think even the Republicans admit that they may temper it, but they admit that we went to war on false premises. I think that is in fact a fact of life.
But more importantly, this shows that he actually, Bugliosi is a guy that did Charles Manson. He's had 100 cases. He is the prosecutor, and he's a very humane person. When you listen to him talk about this and what happened, but what I say is the fact that he's a murderer, and this is a real strong words,
Yeah, let's move on. It's
Okay,
rhetoric.
sure.
It's great to say he's a murderer, but you have no way to prosecute Bush. You have no way to impeach Bush. He's going to be out of office in January. So let's talk about stuff that we can. First of all, how do we extricate ourselves from Iraq?
Okay.
You can't just walk away now for two reasons.
What?
One, because we created the mess over there.
Sure.
And two, remember how many Iraqi lives have been lost.
Well over 100,000.
You're talking about people who lived a middle-class existence, had nothing to do with Saddam Hussein, who had 2 cars and a chicken in every pot and lived an existence just like a middle-class existence over here, and now they're living in poverty, they have no electricity, they fear for their lives, and it's all changed for them. And we can't just leave this debris and heartache and tragedy behind us over there as well. But so we have to extricate ourselves in some kind of an orderly fashion. Barack Obama says he'll do that. Certainly the Democrats running here, and even in some parts of the country, even some of the Republicans are saying, yes, we need to have some kind of an orderly transition. We need to get our people out of the line of fire, et cetera. I mean,
well, the Iraqi parliament just put it out that they want us out by 2011. They said, here's the conditions, meet these conditions, and we should honor what they're saying, because we said we're going to go in there, set up a democracy, let them decide. Well, let's prove that we are really had true intentions.
How we get out? I've got on my website, I went to Kuwait in 1959 on a destroyer. I have a website that shows a summary of the occupation, how many laws we've broken. It's absolutely an illegal war. There's only one answer: have immediate ceasefire, drop back to defensive positions. As an occupying power, we are required by both the Hague Regulations, the Geneva Convention, and all these things we'd have to have a massive relief effort to take care of the people. I believe it would settle down very rapidly.
Remember, we created a whole new generation of terrorists within Iraq that did not exist there before. The real hotbed of the problem, which we tend to be ignoring at this point, is Afghanistan. That's where the heart of terrorism, and the Taliban is gaining ground again in Afghanistan and in the mountains of Pakistan.
That's also
in Iraq. We need to solve the Iraq problem.
We solve both of them.
We need to solve it.
Both of them. Afghanistan is an illegal war also. NATO is seeing that you can't have a bunch of NATO troops down there. You're not going to win. There's no such thing as winning an occupation. We have to have immediate ceasefire and negotiate diplomacy. Get the thing. I believe it would work.
Until we get rid of George Bush, we're going to have no diplomacy.
Then
he's the laughing stock of the free world, let's face it.
Well, that's why I go back to getting Congress back in. If Obama's going to stop the war, he just signed off another $163 billion. And that extended it all the way to next June. He has to rescind that. We have to pull back that 2009 supplemental and say, cutting off this money, except for the relief effort and whatever.
But what do we do with the troops that are over there? I mean,
what they do is fall back to the defensive position, and then I get all those Blackwater troops out of there. And then what will happen? The thing will settle down. We are the ones that did it. You said we destroyed this. They'll take care of the terrorists. I'm sorry I talk so much about it, but that's really one of the key issues.
We're going to have to take another break. I am really enjoying this discussion with you guys. We're running out of time. We should have 2 or 3 hours. Again, we are talking to the 3 independent candidates from the 8th, 10th, and 11th congressional districts. We have a lot of issues we want to discuss, but when you have this many people and they have a lot to say, they don't always have an opportunity. Time flies. So I hope you'll stay with us, and we will be back in 2 minutes. Thanks for watching.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged, where teachers have more time to teach, and students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/meth.
We're back, we're hot.
Once again, George Burke with the Inside Scoop, Virginia.
Welcome back. We have the independent candidates from the 3 Northern Virginia congressional districts with us today. Ron Fisher, Niraj Nigam, and Joe Odo from the 8th, 10th, and 11th, respectively. Let's move on. I mean, we could talk about the war all day. I think there's some level of agreement, but you know that's going to be an issue. We're going to have a new president. I personally hope that new president is Barack Obama, and I think that if we do have a new president and we have a stronger control of Congress by the Democrats, then they can truly be held accountable if they don't have some success. But we shall see. But let's move on very briefly to the environment. Everybody believes in global warming?
Right, absolutely.
Unlike Keith Fimian, you know, you don't believe polar bears nestle up to pipelines. I don't know if you've heard that one, Joe. This is Fimian's latest thing.
No.
He says the pipeline is good up in Anwar, coming down and through Alaska, because the
like
bears get to nestle up.
having a roast.
Right, they're cooking
Barbecue.
there. Yeah, right. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, George, you know, that's one of the main things that we as independent Greens advocate. More trains, less traffic is our main slogan. We are pretty upset about the fact that because there was campaign donors to the elected officials, we ended up with a toll road around the Beltway. When we had proposed connecting a circle around the Beltway, an entire lateral rail system connecting in Virginia, Alexandria, Springfield, Annandale, Tysons, using existing stations. 1/10 the cost of this toll road, a lot less death on the highways. I have a good friend that lost his mom on the Beltway. And so this is a good, logical, green, long-term solution that'll get us out of the war making that we tend to do.
Were there private companies willing to finance it as there were for the toll road? The hot lane.
Roads are a job of the government. I don't know why they're giving to private industry to start off with.
And actually, there are new modern rail systems, George, that do pay for themselves. So I'm sure that if there wasn't such a 28-to-1 donation of money from Congress to the highways versus mass transit, and there was a lot more broader thinking on the whole rail, cross-country, high-speed rail connections, we can connect the 10 most urban areas of the country with high-speed rail and get there faster on train than we can by plane. So if we just shift our priorities and think long-term, longer green infrastructure improvements, and I mean, it can be done. The money's out there.
As you know, any kind of transportation system, unlike in Europe where the federal governments in Europe basically own them and run them. We don't have that system.
No, but now that we're a socialist country buying banks, I mean, why shouldn't we nationalize and build infrastructure? You know what? We have a national security issue. The ports aren't secure. We have highways was the big thinking. That's for national security. That's why Eisenhower built them. But you know what? We're going to need to go beyond that for our future generation. And this is a national security issue, that we are tied to fossil fuel and dependent on the rest of the world.
And more importantly, jobs. Get a lot of jobs generated here to get out of this depression, out of the depression we're going to have.
I'm very interested to hear how you guys feel about health care. Let me frame the issue. 47 million Americans have no health care and no access.
50 million underinsured, too.
50 million underinsured. I'll give you that number as well. 8 or 10 million of the uninsured are kids. Bush vetoed the S-CHIPS bill. Everybody's familiar with that, which would have provided
Finally vetoed something, did he?
Yeah, which would have provided additional funding to cover about another 6 or 8 million kids.
Didn't veto anything in 6 years.
Healthcare is a huge issue. Many small businesses cannot afford to provide health care to their employees.
I don't think it should be up to business to
There's the
provide
whole idea of those folks who have a pre-existing condition. They can even switch a job or try to get private health care, and that condition won't be covered. Well, what do? They end up bankrupt. And when those people go bankrupt and people go to the emergency room to seek health care in lieu of a regular physician or a clinic or something
because
else,
they weren't
we
being
all pay
treated
that.
for health and staying healthy.
We all pay that, and they don't get any
Exactly.
preventive care, even in many health plans. I mean, I happen to be a lucky one. I have darn good health care. But there are many Americans who don't. And many Americans, even in Fairfax, who may be the epitome of wealth and have a nice, huge house and a couple of nice cars out front, but they're still at the edge and they can't afford that $15,000 annual nut. Small businesses who the owners want to get it for themselves and their own family and a handful of employees, and then they realize how expensive it is. How do we solve it?
I have a solid plan. What we need to do is have the universal health care. I have TRICARE for life. Everything's covered, my 30 years in the Navy after I'm 65. But it would be way less expensive. Pay doctors by the hour, have digitized health records, take hospitals like the county hospitals that are going broke, make them into Medicare hospitals. Everybody goes in and gets
So you
treated.
favor nationalizing it?
Nationalize
the whole
health
thing.
care, and then hire a lot of young people to come in there and work and have teaching hospitals all over the place with DVDs and internet now. You could learn this stuff right on the job. Hospital like, don't shut down Walter Reed. Just make it into a...
But so let me get this straight. Dismantle the entire system and just make it nationalized. That's what you're saying.
No. A doctor...
Where are you going to hire your doctors from when they all move to
the
Europe?
doctors would have an afternoon where they would see Medicare patients. I went to see a doctor in 5...
Is that going to be enough for 47 million people and 50 million
Sure it would be.
underinsured?
If the doctors are with their clinic, they can make the same amount of money. They could see patients one afternoon a week or two or a day or whatever. My primary caregiver gets paid by the hour. And the idea of paying, and when you go to a hospital, you have to pay 5 or 6 different bills. There are the radiologist, the guy that does the biopsies, these things are all separately. You could run the thing very efficiently. Insurance company costs 1/3 of what we pay. So we could hire those guys with management type contracts. Don't give them a percentage of the healthcare cost, but have them do the people. But people ought to be able to walk in, and there's all kinds of things we can do.
All right, Joe?
Well, I can see some benefit in Ron's simplification that's needed, but actually I think that the experiment in Massachusetts is probably a little bit better of a model, where you actually require people to get insurance, just like we have to get car insurance. What that does is you've got now younger people in the pool, so you're lowering the rates. You've also got health, preventive medicine, and well care. Don't wait till you're sick to go to the emergency room. Get covered before you're sick. Prevent the illness and disease ahead of time. And so those who have trouble affording it, we can help them afford it. So we basically leave the system mainly as it is, tighten up the administration, and certainly tighten up the pharmaceutical outrageous 3-to-1 ratio where they spend for advertising versus research. We need to fix that, especially considering we wrote a giant prescription bill, one of the biggest entitlements we ever had.
Well, and Connolly says this quite often, the reality of the matter is that the only people who get to negotiate prices in this country are the VA. The rest of Medicare and Medicaid do not negotiate prices. They take the drugs at face value. Niraj?
I think we need a mixture of private and public health care. I mean, private industry can remain as it is. For the uninsured, we can have some public system that is based on income. People who make less than $25,000 is totally free. Beyond that, you have a choice. You want to go to private or you want to go to public. It's up to you. If you go to public, you pay based on what your income is. And we need to allow free importation of drugs from abroad. I don't see why the same company is selling the drugs here at $10, is selling them abroad at $1. We need to equalize that. And finally, we need to remove that 7.5% tax limitation before you can deduct medical expenses. That would go a long way towards making healthcare more affordable. I think do affordable because it's going to be economical, people can afford to go there, and we can nip problems in the bud before they become major problems.
All right, I got a question.
Let me make a point about this insurance. You're going to force people to buy insurance, and a third of that money is going to the insurance company. And they're not doing anything. And they get paid not to treat it.
Aren't you regulating it now?
No, I'm telling you.
After they
wait a second. I asked a question. If you say you're going to buy your insurance, I don't have a job. What do? I just got laid off because you guys didn't take care of me.
A lot of people who have jobs don't even have insurance, right?
Well, I know that, but the government telling somebody you have to buy insurance is absurd.
Well, you're telling the government to give them insurance?
We got to move on, but let me just say, you need to look at what occurred in Massachusetts, because what Devil Patrick has done up there, it was a Democratic governor, Republican legislator. No, at the time it was a Republican. Romney did it. It was a Republican legislator, Democratic legislator, Republican governor, Democratic legislature. They did it. And is it perfect? No, pretty well. But it's actually working, and we need to look at different models. There is, in my opinion, no clear way.
And the states ought to be incubators for making those programs.
We're running out of time, and I've got a tough question for you guys. And I'm going to start with Joe, and because Joe's been involved in this race a couple times, et cetera. You know, I'm not trying to be mean here, but I don't think any of you guys are going to win on November 4th, okay? I respect what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. That's why I asked you at the front end to talk about that. But, Joe, if you were not in this race, you have two choices. You have Connolly, the Democrat. You have Fimian, the Republican. I'm not going to ask you to expound on it.
I'll tell you what, George, I've already won by running. Okay?
Yeah, I'll give it.
I may not get elected because I don't have the $1 million it takes to get elected, but I will always vote my conscience, and my conscience tells me that I cannot vote for one of the big two parties.
What if you had no choice?
I cannot vote for the evil of two lesser. Then I will skip voting.
Okay. Ron?
I think the same, but neither one of the candidates that I'm running against are qualified to be a congressman.
Niraj?
Well, if I absolutely had to choose, I guess I would have to vote for Wolf, but I still think that he's not the right candidate, and I think Judy's even worse.
Interesting. All right, we've had Niraj Nigam from the 10th, Joe Odo from the 11th, and Ron Fisher from the 8th. These are our independent candidates running in November. And if you don't like the choices out there, it's one more choice for you.
Check out our website, votejoinrun.us.
So thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.